Actually, the Democrats in recent polls are actually faring worse than the Republicans. Take a look at a Quinnipiac poll out just this week. Shows that Democrats have their lowest approval rating in the poll's 15-year history. Only 18% give Democrats a high approval rating in the handling of the economy. Only 18%, 73% disapproval. What are you doing wrong?
Well, clearly that's an outlier poll.
Several months later.
I'm Matt Gelka in Washington. New polling shows that Democratic voters aren't exactly thrilled with their own party when it comes to the midterm elections, but also Republicans still have some work to do too. Democrats aren't thrilled with Democrats, according to recent polling.
These numbers are just atrociously awful.
A CNN poll from late March asked voters, do congressional Democrats have the right priorities? 74% of voters overall said no, and it didn't get better within the party. 55% of Democrats, or people who lean Democrat, also said no.
I think you're seeing a lot of frustration just generally, and, because Democrats are the out party, I think there's a lot of pressure to try and provide solutions for a lot of people's problems.
Trey Easton with the Searchlight Institute, a think tank devoted to pushing Dems toward more popular policy, says he's not surprised people think the left needs some new ideas.
I think you just got to start doing stuff differently. Republicans have figured this out, especially, President Trump. And I think the more Democrats just sort of shake off the rust of thinking that they can't say certain things or behave certain ways, people will come back. I think people have to see, life in the party.
The CNN poll showed 67% of Democrats believe the fight over whether or not to lean more left or track more towards the center is causing problems within the party. Republicans, including the president, frequently hammer Dems for issues like voter ID and transgender participation in sports.
They don't want to sign voter ID is another issue. It's a big issue. The fact that they don't have proof of citizenship, that they want transgender for everybody, that they want men in women's sports.
Let's be real for a second. Something doesn't add up right now, and I think a lot of people could feel it, even if they can't quite put it into words. You got the mainstream liberal media, you got polling data, you got everyday conversations people are having at work, at home, even just scrolling online. And the picture that's forming is actually pretty clear. The Democrat Party, as it stands today, is not popular. And I'm not saying that in some exaggerated, over-the-top way. I'm saying it in a very direct, grounded way. When you actually look at the numbers, when you look at how people are responding, when you look at approval ratings and general sentiment, they are sitting at a level of unpopularity that, from my perspective, is hard to ignore. And here's the part that really stands out to me. It's not just that they are unpopular. It's that they are more unpopular than anything else in politics right now, which is unfortunately mind-blowing and more unpopular than Trump. More unpopular than the Republican Party, more unpopular than Congress as a whole in some cases. And I say it's mind-blowing because the simple fact is that the Democratic Party don't seem to think that they are unpopular. Think about that for a second. In a time where people constantly say politics is divided, where both sides get criticized nonstop, one side is still managing to come out as the least trusted, the least liked, the least supported. That says something. Now, at the same time, this isn't surprising to me. This lines up with what we're seeing in real life. Look at cities like New York, look at Chicago, look at Los Angeles. People are dealing with high cost, safety concerns, housing issues, and a general feeling that things aren't moving in the right direction. So when you see polls reflecting dissatisfaction, it matches what people are actually experiencing day to day. It's not complicated. It's not some deep political theory. It's just people reacting to what's in front of them. But here's where it gets interesting is, this is the part that I think a lot of people are either missing or not fully thinking through. Even with all of that, even with the Democrat Party being this unpopular, that does not automatically mean Republicans are going to dominate elections. It doesn't work like that. Elections are not just a scoreboard of who people like more. If it was that simple, the outcome would already be obvious. But that's not how this plays out in the real world. What actually decides elections, especially midterms, is motivation. It's about who is willing to get up, go out, stay in the line, and cast a vote. And right now, whether people want to admit it or not, there is a very real factor driving that motivation on the other side. And that factor is what I would describe as strong opposition to Trump. You got people who, if you ask them straight up, do not like the Democrat Party. They'll complain about policies. They'll point out problems. They'll say things aren't working. But when it comes to vote, their main driver isn't support for Democrats. It's opposition to Trump. It's that simple. Their frustration with one side gets overwritten by their feelings about the other. So now you got this situation where on paper, one party looks weaker, less popular, and less trusted, but in practice, they still have a path because of how motivated certain voters are. And that has real implications for the midterms. Because if one side is voting out of habit or mild support, and the other side is voting out of strong emotion, those are two very different levels of energy, and energy matters. Turnout matters. That's what actually decides these races. So yeah, the polls are interesting. And in my view, they confirm what a lot of us already suspected about where things stand politically. But they also highlight something deeper that you can't ignore if you're trying to understand what's coming next. And we're going to break all that down. Hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and I want you guys to check this out.
Oh, no, not at all, at least when it comes to you isolate Democrats. I mean, these numbers are just atrociously awful. A double A for the Democrats here. I mean, just take a look here. Congressional Dems have the right priorities. Look at this. Overall, 74%, nearly 3 in 4 say no. Just 25% overall say yes. You might say, okay, well, at least Dems like Democrats. Not the case. Look at this. The majority of Democrats are independents who lean Democrats. Look at this. 55% say no, congressional Democrats do not have the right priorities. And then you just see a minority, 45% of Democrats say that congressional Democrats have the right priorities. This to me just jumps out at the screen because it screams primary challenges all over the map. And it says that even if Democrats don't like Donald Trump, they don't like their own party either when it comes to Congress. And overall, I mean, my goodness gracious.
So this is sort of like Democrat on Democrat crime here. What's overall approval among Democrats of their leaders?
Yeah, okay. So, you speak about Democrat on Democrat crime. And I want to know how unusual what we're seeing right now about how Democrats feel about Democrats in Congress is. Take a look at this. This is a trend line going back through the years, midterm elections in which there's a GOP president. Look at this. In 2006, Dems' net approval of congressional Democratic leaders was plus 28. You go back to the last midterm, look at that, plus 19. Very much on the positive side of life. The bottom has fallen out. The bottom has fallen out. Minus 4 points. That is Democrats' own net approval of their own congressional leaders. Even Democrats don't like their own leaders when it comes to Congress. And overall, of course, the numbers are just absolutely awful. So Democrat on Democrat crime, absolutely. This to me screams, again, primary challenges across the map. And it screams to me, hey, when it comes to those next leadership elections, maybe something might be cooking.
It also just means we have to maybe look at these midterms differently because this is a different prism. We haven't seen this type of thing before. We don't know what impact that might have.
That's exactly right. And there are a lot of folks who've been looking at the generic congressional ballot and wondering why Democrats don't have a larger lead. And this is a big reason why, I would think.
Okay, so there's Hakeem Jeffries in the House. Chuck Schumer is the Senate Minority Leader. What might this mean for Chuck Schumer? What are some of the predictions about whether he can stay as the Democratic leader?
Chuck Schumer has been the Senate leader for the Democrats for a long period of time, before I even came to CNN, and I'm not quite sure that he will say it. Take a look at where the people who are putting their money where their mouth is. Chance Schumer wins the next Dem Senate leader election. Back on December 1, look at this. It was 2 and 3 according to the Cash prediction market. Then drops to 56% in February. And then look at where we are right now. Just 50%. A coin toss. If I had a coin, I would toss it up in the air. A coin toss when it comes to Schumer actually winning the next Dem Senate leader election. And we've seen a number of Senate candidates, Democrats, across the map saying, we don't want any part of Chuck Schumer to be the next leader. And there's a big reason why that is, and it's because at this point, look at this minus 4, even Democrats don't approve of their own congressional leaders.
These numbers bear watching over the course of the summer and into November, to be sure. Harriet, and thank you very much.
All right, so let's break this down because this is where it really starts to make sense when you look at it in real life. The main issue with the Democratic Party right now, from my perspective, is that they're stuck in a position where they can't win no matter what direction they go. And I mean that literally. On one side, you got people saying the party has gone too far left. They look at the policies, they look at the messaging, they look at things like crime, spending, cultural issues, and they feel like it's just out of touch with everyday life. But at the exact same time, you got another group on the left saying the opposite. They're saying Democrats aren't far left enough. Think about how strange that is for a second. One side says you're going too far. The other side says you haven't gone far enough. And that's not a small disagreement. That's a fundamental problem with your base. And this isn't just theory. You can actually see it play out. You got activists and more progressive voters who are constantly pushing for more extreme policies, more aggressive rhetoric, more confrontation, especially when it comes to Trump. From their perspective, the Democrat Party isn't doing enough. They're not fighting hard enough. They're not all in the way they want them to be. But then you got a completely different group, more moderate voters, people in the middle, people just trying to live their lives, and they look at all of that and it turns them off completely. These are people who might agree with Democrats on a few issues, but they don't like the direction things have gone. They don't like the woke messaging. They don't like feeling like everything is extreme or political all the time. And here's what this actually looks like in real life. You got someone in a place like the suburbs outside Chicago or New York. They're dealing with rising costs. Maybe they're worried about safety. Maybe their rent just went up again. Groceries are more expensive. And they're looking at the political landscape thinking, I'm not really happy with Democrats right now. But then at the same time, they still have a strong negative reaction to Trump. So now they're stuck. They don't like what Democrats are doing, but they also don't want to support Trump. That's the voter Democrats. That's the voter Democrats are holding on to right now. Not because those voters are excited, not because they believe in the direction, but because they are conflicted. That's why I say the only thing really holding this coalition together is opposition to Trump. It's not unity. It's not shared vision. It's not strong policy agreement. It's basically one common feeling. And that's a very fragile way to build political support, because once that feeling weakens or once something else becomes more important in people's daily lives, that coalition starts to fall apart, and you can already see cracks forming. You got more progressive voices going after establishment Democrats like Chuck Schumer, and you got frustration within their own ranks. And yeah, you even see moments where party leadership is getting criticized from the inside. That's not a sign of a stable party. That's a sign of a party trying to balance two completely different directions at the same time. And the reality is, when you try to please everyone like that, you usually end up pleasing no one. Now, to be fair, the situation didn't just appear overnight. This is what happens when a party leans heavily into its most vocal faction without fully thinking through how that plays with the broader public. The loudest voices gets the most attention, but they're not always the majority. And when policies or messaging starts reflecting that smaller, louder group, the average voter starts to feel disconnected. So yeah, Democrats right now are in a tough spot. If they lean further left, they risk pushing away moderates even more. If they try to move back toward the center, they risk backlash from their own base, the radical left. That's the damned if you do, damned if you don't situation they're dealing with. And on top of all of that, they're trying to win back seats, trying to stay competitive in elections while facing a reality that a lot of voters just don't like where the party is right now. That's the context you have to understand before you even get into the polling or the media coverage. Because when you hear something like an NBC anchor talking about challenges for Democrats, it's not happening in a vacuum, right?
Welcome back. We've got a bunch of key primaries coming up this summer in races where Democrats are hoping they'll be able to compete in the fall. And while Democrats are increasingly confident they can overcome Republicans' narrow majority and retake the House, their path to victory in the Senate is much more complicated. Joining me now to break it down is our NBC chief data analyst, Steve Kornacki. So, Steve, give us the reality check here. How realistic is it that Democrats are actually going to be able to retake the Senate? And if so, what is their path in order to do so?
Yeah, Mel, I guess the answer to that question is, how realistic do you think it is for Democrats to win in not one, but two pretty deeply pro-Trump states? That's what they'd have to do to get the Senate. Look at it this way. Here's the big picture map. Democrats need a net gain of 4 seats if they're going to take back the Senate. Now, the first order of business for them is they don't want to lose any ground. They got to protect a couple seats here. The 3 you're thinking of there, it's John Ossoff in Georgia. It's also Democratic-held seats in New Hampshire and Michigan. They don't want to lose any of those. That would only add to the Republican majority and make the Democrats' hill probably too steep. But if they do win those 3, hold on to them, then they still need that net gain of 4 seats. And they'd be looking to do it probably from this list. These are the 6 Republican seats that I think to some degree folks think are going to be in play this year. Now, again, Democrats need 4. You could look at Maine, Susan Collins running in a state that already didn't vote for Trump. That's the most realistic for Democrats. Of course, Collins has survived in some tough conditions before, but that could be one for Democrats. North Carolina, Democrats excited about their candidate there, the former governor, Roy Cooper. Trump only won it by 3 points. That's not unrealistic at all for Democrats. That could be 2, but then draw a line there, because the complexion politically of these states changes. Ohio, Alaska, Iowa, Texas. Democrats hoping to pick up Republican seats here. All of them double-digit states for Donald Trump. These aren't just red states. These are, in the Trump era, these are very red states, certainly in 2024. And in the political atmosphere is just different in red states. Take a look at this. This from sort of a compilation of all of our NBC News, CNBC polling. Our pollsters put this together here. Trump states, that's what we're talking about. Democrats needing to win at least 2 of those Senate races here versus swing states versus Harris states. Views of Donald Trump. In swing states, they're almost 10 points more negative than positive. In Trump states, Trump is above water by 3 points. Views of the Democratic Party, they're not good anywhere. 23 points negative in swing states, but almost 10 points worse than that in red states. Views of the Republican Party, they're not that good anywhere, but they're almost even in these Trump states. So again, if Democrats are going to win back the Senate this year, they got to protect all their seats, but they got to win 2 of this group of 4. They probably have to win 2 of this group of 4 in a much less hostile environment in all the states to Trump than you're going to get in the average swing state now.
Very insightful. Thank you so much, Steve Kornacki at the Big Board. My favorite.
There you have it, right? So you guys heard NBC anchor talking about challenges for the Democrats. It's not happening in a vacuum. Like I said, it's happening on top of all of this. A divided base, mixed messaging in a coalition that's being held together more by opposition than by agreement. And that's a big problem when you headed into critical elections. All right. So when you look at that and you really want to talk about that part and a matter of that, this is where things really start to stand out. And honestly, from my perspective, this is where it gets a little embarrassing for Democrats. You've seen it, you heard it. And even if you pay even a little bit of attention to the news, you already know what the environment looks like right now. It is constant. It is nonstop. Every single day across most mainstream outlets, the coverage around Trump is overwhelmingly negative. And I'm not saying that as an opinion. I'm saying just observe it. Turn on the TV, scroll through the headlines, look at the way stories are framed. It is almost always negative. That's the media environment we've been in for years now. So think about what that means in practical terms. If one side is getting hit with negative coverage day after day after day, you would expect that to have a major impact on public opinion. You would expect that person, that movement, that party to be the least popular option on the board. That would be the logical outcome, but that's not actually what we're seeing. And this is where it doesn't add up. Despite that constant negative coverage, when you look at key states, the ones that actually decide elections, Democrats are still polling worse in many cases, not slightly worse, but clearly underwater. And here's what this actually looks like when you break it down. In solid blue states, yes, Trump tends to be more unpopular. That's not surprising. But even in those same states, Democrats aren't exactly thriving. You're looking at approval numbers that are deeply negative. That tells you people are unsatisfied even in areas where Democrats are supposed to be strongest. Now shift over to swing states, the places that decide everything. These are the states where elections are won or lost. And what you're seeing there is even more telling. Democrats are struggling to maintain support, while Republicans in many cases are closer to neutral. Not overwhelmingly loved, but not deeply rejected either. And that difference matters because, again, this isn't about perfection. It's about comparison. If one side is sitting at -15 and the other is hovering around even, that's a gap. I mean, look, that's a gap. That's a real problem heading into an election cycle here. And this is why you're starting to see signs of concern from the Democrat Party itself. This isn't just outside criticism. This is coming from their own strategists, their own analysis, people who are paid to look at the data and figure out how to win in what they're seeing as a situation where they can't take anything for granted. So now you're hearing conversations about candidate selection, about messaging, about trying to appeal to voters they feel like they're losing. And here's what that tells you in plain English. It tells you they know there's a problem because when a party feels confident, they don't start second guessing everything. They don't start scrambling and scraping to adjust their approach. But when the numbers look like this, when the support isn't where it needs to be, suddenly every decision feels higher stakes. And again, let's bring this back to real life. Imagine you're running a business and your customer satisfaction numbers keep dropping. Even though your biggest competitor is getting hammered in the press every single day, at some point you have to look in the mirror and say, okay, what are we doing wrong? That's the position Democrats are in right now. Because even with all the external factors working in their favor, the internal perception of their party is still negative. And this is where the life lesson is. Take the speck out your own eye to see what you're doing and holding yourself accountable, looking in the mirror to see what you need to adjust before you judge others. In this case, the Democrats constantly hammering the Republican Party is centered around Donald Trump. And that's not something you can spin your way out forever. Now, to be fair, some people will look at this and say, well, media coverage isn't everything. And that's true. People make decisions based on their own experiences too. And that actually reinforces the point. Because if voters are still rating Democrats this poorly, even with everything else going on, that means their real world experiences are weighing heavily in that decision. It goes back to what we talked about earlier: cost of living, safety, housing, quality of life. These are not abstract issues. These are things people deal with every single day. And when those things aren't improving or feel like they are getting worse, it shapes how people see the party in charge. So yeah, when you see these numbers, and when I mean in charge, I'm talking about it don't have to just be the president. We talk about local legislators, which really matter more than a presidential election. Not saying that the president election doesn't matter, but your governors and your mayor, your local legislators really shape how you live within that state. I call it like your mini president. So yeah, that's what I mean by the party in charge shaping your life. So yeah, when you see these numbers, when you hear these discussions, it's not random. It's a reflection of something deeper going on politically. And the reaction you're starting to see from Democrat strategists, the concern, the adjustments, the conversations about how to stay competitive, that's all part of the bigger picture. They understand the stakes, and they understand that being this unpopular, especially heading into major elections, is not a position you want to be in. All right, so now let's read this article and bring it all together. It says a new CNN poll reveals how people mad at both parties see the midterms. America's view of both the Democratic and Republican parties remain deeply negative, according to a new CNN poll conducted by SSRS. In an election year that may turn on which party voters see as the lesser of two evils, the Democrats hold an early advantage. About 1/4 of the public holds a negative view of both parties, so-called double haters. Voters in that group prefer that the Democrats in the upcoming midterms by 31 points. In the era characterized by negativity towards all sides in Washington, the voting patterns and preferences of people who have negative feelings towards both Democrats and Republicans could play a key role in elections. Those voters who had unfavorable views of both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton proved decisive in the 2016 election and broke in Trump's favor again in 2024. In the 2022 election, when both parties were viewed negatively by just over half of all voters, quote unquote, double hater voters broke in Republicans' favor by a wide margin, according to CNN exit polls. The vote preferences of the current crop of double haters are driven more by opposition to the GOP rather than enthusiasm for the Democrats. Just 28% of Americans hold a favorable view of the Democrat Party, with the Republican Party a few points higher at 32%, in large part because Republicans take a more positive view of their own party than do Democrats. Compared to the midterms in President Donald Trump's first term, both the president and the Democrats have grown less popular, while Trump's 35% approval ratings is 7 points lower than it was at this point in the 2018 midterm cycle. The Democrat Party's net favorability has shifted from about even then to net negative by nearly 30 points now. Ratings for the GOP were deeply underwater in both years. Overall, registered voters say about a 6-point margin that they'll prefer the Democrat Party's candidate over Republican candidate if the elections for Congress were held today. The most motivated voters break 57% for the Democrats to 38% for the Republicans on the generic ballot. It was a similar 56% Democrats to 41% Republicans among that group in January. What do double haters hate? When asked what they most dislike about each party, double haters offer different reasons for their dissatisfaction with each. Their most common reasons for disliking Democrats are viewing them as a do-nothing. 22% say this, saying they are not standing up enough to Trump and the GOP, 11%, or they are too liberal, 10%. Another 9% call them weak or spineless, with another 9% saying the party doesn't care about people. Double haters' most common reason for disliking the GOP is what they see as the party's failure to stand up to Trump. 14%, followed by a sense that the party doesn't care about people. 10% views about Trump more generally, 8%, and a perception of the party as corrupt, 8%. Quote unquote, there is such a divide and no one can compromise to get anything done, wrote Independent, who answered the survey. They act like spoiled brats. All right, so let's bring all this together because this is where the full picture starts to make sense. And honestly, this is where things get a little uncomfortable. And if you're looking at it from a political strategy standpoint, the reality is this, and the data backs it up. Even though Democrats are deeply unpopular right now, even though their favorability numbers are low, even though people are frustrated with their policies, they still have one major advantage. And it's not policy, it's not performance, and it's not even enthusiasm for their platform. It's motivation driven by opposition. That's it. Opposition against Trump. That's the game right now. And you can see it clearly when you look at the CNN polling data. You got groups of voters, about a quarter of the country, who don't like either party. They don't trust Democrats. They don't trust Republicans. They're frustrated across the board. And these are what people call the double haters. Now, if you think about that in real life, these are the people you talk to who say, man, all of this is a mess. They're not excited about anything politically. They're not loyal to a party. They're just fed up. But here's the key part. When it actually comes time to vote, that group is leaning Democrat by a pretty wide margin. Not because they love Democrats, but because they're more motivated to vote against Republicans and more specifically against Trump, like I said. And that's just a huge detail that a lot of people overlook. This isn't about people being inspired. It's about people being driven by what they don't want. And from my perspective, that creates a very strange political environment where negativity is actually the main fuel. Now, let's make this practical. Think about someone who watches political content all day, someone who is constantly hearing that everything is broken, everything is bad, everything is a crisis. That person is going to be emotionally charged. They're going to feel like they have to do something about it. And voting becomes that outlet. That's why you see higher turnout in certain elections from people who are driven by frustration or anger. And to be fair, this isn't new. This happens on both sides at different times. But right now, it's clearly benefiting Democrats in terms of motivation. At the same time, Republican voters are at a different mindset. Their party holds power. So there's less urgency, and that's just basic human nature. When your side is in charge, people tend to relax a little bit, and they're not as fired up to show up and vote, especially in midterms. We've seen this pattern before. You go back to those early special elections after Trump first took office, it didn't take long at all. Within weeks, you had strong turnout from people who were motivated purely by opposition. That energy showed up immediately. So what we're seeing now is not some shocking, unprecedented situation. It's actually very consistent with how voters behave. The difference is the scale and the intensity of it. And this is why, in my view, Republicans can't just look at Democrat unpopularity and assume that's enough. It's not. If anything, it creates a false sense of security because elections are not decided by who is the least liked. They are decided by who shows up. Now, there's another layer to this that matters. Like I said, the double haters. These double haters, they're not loyal. They shift. In 2016, they broke one way. In 2022, they leaned another way. Now, they're leaning Democrat again. That tells you everything you need to know. The group is not predictable. They respond to the moment. They respond to emotion, to headlines, to what feels urgent at the time. So if you're looking ahead to the midterms, the real question is simple. Who is more motivated when that moment comes? Not today, not in a poll, but on election day. And this is where things can change because motivation is not fixed. It can go up, it can go down. And it usually depends on what's happening in the country. Let's be real. If things calm down, if the economy starts to feel a little bit better for everyday people, if there's less chaos in the headlines, that reduces urgency. That reduces the emotional drive to go out and vote. On the flip side, if there's constant controversy, constant tension, constant negativity, that fuels turnout on the opposition side. That's just how it works. So from a strategy standpoint, what this looks like is pretty straightforward. Republicans need to give their voters a reason to show up, not just a reason to be dissatisfied with Democrats. And at the same time, whether people like it or not, reducing the level of constant outrage in the political environment will likely lower motivation on the other side. That doesn't mean people stop disagreeing, but it does mean they're less energized to act on it. And this is where real world conditions matter more than anything. Think about a family dealing with rising costs. If things start to stabilize, if they feel a little less pressure, politics become less urgent. But if they feel things are unstable, if every day feels like something is going wrong, that pushes people to engage. That's the difference. Now, looking ahead, my honest view is this, and it stands right now. Democrats probably have the edge in terms of motivation. That's why you're seeing predictions about them potentially taking back the House. While Republicans may hold on to the Senate by a narrow margin, but that's not locked in. We've seen how quickly things change, can shift. We saw it in 2022 when expectations didn't match reality, and we can see it again. Because a few key factors, how the economy feels, how stable things are globally, how intense the political environment is, those things can change the entire outcome. And that's why I'm not in the camp that says this is already decided, because it's not. There's still a lot of room for movement here. But the core takeaway stays the same. Democrats being unpopular does not automatically translate until Republican wins. That's the mistake people make. The real battle is over motivation. Who is fired up? Who feels like they have something at stake and who actually follows through and votes. And right now, whether people like it or not, the main thing holding the Democrat coalition together is opposition to Trump. That's the engine. If that weakens, the whole dynamic changes. If it stays strong, it keeps them competitive, even with low approval. That's the reality of where things stand. So we'll see how it plays out. I pray people just look at the policies, look at where they live in, look at their local legislators, and look at things objectively, take their emotions out of it. But one thing is clear. This is not going to be decided by popularity alone. It's going to be decided by turnout, energy, and which side understands that better when it actually counts. But let me know what you guys think of this. Catch you in the next one. Spread that peace, love, and positivity always. As always, we just having a conversation. Peace, family.